See, I went up to him as I was walking, and he introduced himself, and I was like, you know what, man, you made me a lot of money recently in your fights. So big up to you, man. And then he's like, yeah, thank you. And yeah, he had a lot he had a few other guys with him, young boxers, and he was like, yeah, look out for these boxers, man, they're coming up. So he was a very humble sort of guy, a personality where when you first meet someone, you get your first impression of them. And he just seemed like he was trying to take the shine away from him when I was, giving him credit. So you can tell he's a very
Away
humble
from
guy.
yourself.
Yeah, Adam Azim is very humble, man. He's a very, very good guy, man. But I like the confidence about him. He just quiet with it. He's not a very outspoken person like that. You know, he does his talking inside the ring. So yeah, man.
Perfect. By the
In terms
way,
of where, huh?
we just caught that live. By the way, everything that you just said, that was just live and candid. So welcome to the collaboration with Zayn Musa Boxing and Kyrie Abu El-Kheer MMA. That's right, from the West
Yeah,
Side all the way to London. Yeah,
from London to USA connection. You get me?
that's
Big
right,
up
man.
yourself, Kyrie.
That's right. So I got to ask you, man. You know, obviously you've been quite embedded with Hamzah Sheeraz and his team and all that, right? Um,
Yeah.
what are some qualities that you see in him that can, potentially make him a real future legend?
Who's that? Adam Azim. Who you talking about? Adam Azim.
Well, oh, sorry, Hamzah Sheeraz in particular. But yeah, we'll
Hamza
get to
Shiraz.
Adam in a sec. But yeah,
Yeah, we'll get to Hamza Shiraz. The thing with Hamza Shiraz, he's a very dedicated uh, boxer who lives the life. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He goes from the UK. He goes straight to USA and trains out there, which a lot of boxers you see nowadays from Britain in the UK, they don't do that. They tend to stay in Britain. And no offense to the UK fighters or anything, but I just feel personally the best fighters, the best boxers are out in the USA in America. And what I think he's doing is going out there for training camps, and he's getting that good sparring, that good sort of experience from different sort of fighters. There's Cuban fighters, there's Mexican fighters, there's South American fighters, there's American fighters. So you get a lot of sort of sparring partners out there which replicate a lot of your opponents that you're gonna be fighting. So you're basically preparing for a win, for a victory when you're going out there and you're making sacrifices, leaving your family and friends. Because he's a British fighter, and don't get it twisted, he's got a big following in the UK. So for him to go down to the USA, which is not ideal for a lot of fighters, they don't do that in this day and age. But if you look at the greats like Lennox Lewis, people that have come up from uh, the UK to Britain, from America to America, they've trained out in America, and that's what's made the difference for them. So in that sense, you can see from his last couple of performances, Hamza Shiraz
even
has been
Tyson Fury
very
himself
dominant
as
in that
well.
three, you know. So I feel
Yeah,
like he's making a lot of noise right now.
yeah, Tyson Fury as well. He also trained out here in the United States, obviously with the Kronk Gym out in Detroit. Shout out to Kronk Detroit out in out in that gym. Eminem also trained in that gym, right? They got a lot of good fighters out there, good caliber of guys. Even Eminem himself had referenced getting beat up by a 14-year-old kid that was coming up there. You know what I mean?
So,
And you would imagine that's quite a big a little big credit for that kid, right? I mean, obviously Eminem is not a boxer, but beating up on a legend like that, I'm sure kind of gives you a little bit of a confidence considering that you know, he is a grown man and he's a 14-year-old kid. You know, one of the boxers that we're talking about in the Kronk gym. But I like what you mentioned, how a lot of British fighters have to come out here and train in the United States. But there's
Yeah.
also a contrasting narrative to that. For example, on the MMA side, you look at Conor McGregor, right? He's made a lot of his success just training in Ireland, which obviously is still part of the UK region and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he values this as sort of a flex, right? Hey, look at me. I don't need to train in America or elsewhere. I could just train in my own home country and win championships. Also, Leon Edwards is sort of in that same category as well. Now, Leon
Yeah.
Edwards, he trained
He's a
out
UK
here.
fighter as well, isn't
Yep. He's also
he?
trained out here in the San Jose area. And by the way, that's with who? Guess who other than Khabib's team and American Kickboxing Academy, right? So he trained
Okay.
out here, but then he decided he was going to go back to Birmingham. And the reason why he wanted to do that was because he felt homesick. He felt like, you know what? I don't really need to be out here. Maybe I can get better just being at home. So basically, he was homesick, and just that alone, he felt like, okay, you know what? I'm going to make a lot of successes here. And so he did. So, I mean, there is that contrasting side also, but obviously, this is MMA, right? Even though, as you say, you know, the best fighters in the world may be in the United States and whatnot. But for the boxing side, do you really feel that it's that detrimental for a UK fighter to engage in training out here? Or do you think that they're just not going to improve if they were to just stay in the UK and as a boxer?
Right. Let me put it out there right now. Personally, I feel that the best fighters, the best boxers, are in the USA, and this is no discredit into the UK fighters. I respect every single fighter that goes into the ring. But if you want to get that experience of different styles, different looks, you're not going to get that staying in Britain because, you know, British fighters, when they tend to fight Mexican fighters in boxing and they step up the levels, they more times they get beat. So I'd say it's a very good thing that Hamza Shiraz and people, boxers that go to the USA to train, you know, it gives them that advantage, you know, whereas where you're in the UK, you're a bit limited to what you're getting in terms of sparring, in terms of people that you're going to prepare your future. And
So you
I'm
just feel that you get better looks
saying
in the United
the
States as
life
opposed to staying in the UK?
in UK also do, but
You there? A little connection problem there. I think what Zane is trying to say is that you do
what
get a
he's got
lot
like
more. Repeat that. You are cutting off a little bit when you had last mentioned.
for him personally, Hamza, what it is there's more distractions.
You're breaking
Right?
up,
Can you
brother.
hear me now?
Yeah, better. So you were saying the distractions
Oh, really?
that he has in the UK as opposed to here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what it is with Hamza, like he's a big star in the UK, you know. Obviously he's not very known like that in the USA at the moment, but he'll get there. But what I'm saying to you is Hamza Shiraz has loads of distractions down here in the UK in terms of if he's preparing for a fight, you know, he's got loads of friends down there, family that would like to see him, and I know it's in the culture for people to want to see you and be around you, you know, and that may cause a distraction, you know, 'cause you're not focused 100% on the task at hand. So where it comes up to the USA, he gets the Greek bar, the different sort of box between Mexicans, American fighters, and you're not get that in case. So I feel like he's gonna live more of the life down in America than in the UK. So I feel like that's the difference. You know? Those
Yes. So the
the good thing he's
distraction is
doing that, because going out comfort zone.
sorry, you were breaking up there a little bit. Oh, uh, so there you are back.
Yeah, back, yeah.
So, so what Zayn was conveying there for a second was that he's saying there is more distractions that are going to be prevalent for Hamzah Sheeraz in the UK as opposed to, let's say, coming and training here in America. Which, by the way, is interesting that you say that, considering where Hamzah Sheeraz trains at. It's literally in Hollywood, right? Like, because we say in
Yeah.
MMA, right? You know, John Jones. You know where John Jones trains at? He trains in New Mexico. It is literally a desert state with
Okay.
nothing to do. But we always say that if John Jones was to train in LA or in New York, he would be
Right.
an absolute disaster, because you've seen all the headlines that are dealing with John Jones, right? By the way, shout outs to John Jones and the little current situation he had where drug tester came to his house and she felt threatened because of whatever reason, right? I think he was drunk while he was at some at his friend's birthday party that he was hosting in his house. So, yeah, we have this saying that if John
Right.
Jones was to train in the United States, I'm sorry, I mean, we are in the United States, but I mean, if he was to train in LA or in a big city like Miami or New York, he would have serious problems focusing. But in this case, what you're saying is that for
Mm.
someone like Hamzah Shiraz, it's actually better for him to
Yeah.
train in LA.
Yeah,
With
100%, man. Because, like I said, you get, you know, experiences,
you're
whereas you're
breaking up
not
again.
going to get that in the UK because, you know, we're very limited in terms of skill and, you know, potential. To be honest, there's more potential in America, man.
Yeah, and
I'm
you know
cutting
what?
off,
Here's
isn't it?
Yeah, just a little bit. Now what I was saying with what I
Mm.
was saying with the um what do you call it? The distractions, right? Oh, sorry, Michael Kelly just hit me up right now asking me about WrestleMania. I'm gonna get to that in a second. He right, uh Kyrie, WrestleMania tonight. Are you watching? Did you see The Rock and Cody Rhodes? I said yes. I'm gonna tell him me and Zane are live right now. Yes, me and Zane are live right now, and we will talk about WrestleMania as well. Come watch. But yeah, so
Yeah.
what I was saying with Hamza Shiraz, right? Training in LA. So the reason why we say for
Hmm.
somebody like John Jones, why it would be detrimental for his career to train in LA is because we all know what goes on in LA, right? Number one, there's aside from the fact there's a lot of gang banging going on, you know, and the fact that a lot of the gangbangers down in LA literally extort a lot of the stars that come in there, like Soldier Boy. You ever seen Soldier Boy walk in Compton? Those guys extort him because he wants to be down with the hood. And then you got actors like Shaq, or I'm sorry, basketball players and
Yeah.
actors getting into the mix with that. And then the temptations of drugs and Hollywood and just the prevalent availability of alcohol and
Yeah.
weed and all of that. But with someone like Hamza Shiraz, it's sort of like he can
Yeah.
take the advantage of being in LA because he has that Muslim background to sort of prevent him from getting into all these insane vices that LA can offer, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's true. But not only that, the thing with Hamza Shiraz is, you know, he's got lots of sponsorships backing him and people that believe in him. So, you know, he can't afford to let people down, you know. So I feel like that's another sacrifice he has to make, and I think he's doing that with his performances. As you can see, he's showing and proving that he's a very disciplined athlete, and you know, he can make them sacrifices, you know. He's capable of doing it, whereas you see other fighters who may go out to train to different places, they don't have that level of discipline. And it comes down to his team, you know. I think that his team keep him level grounded, and that's what makes the important decisions in the background, you know. Keeping a motivated team that are there just to make sure that he's, you know, making the right decisions and staying grounded and disciplined whilst he's out in America. So big credit to his team. And like I said, I've met a few of his team when I'm at his fights. You know, I've been introduced to last fight against Liam Williams. His lawyer, Hamzah Sheeraz's personal lawyer, has come up to me and introduced himself, and they seem like they're very screwed on people that are very, you know, intelligent and, you know, there for a purpose to make sure Hamzah Sheeraz reaches the top. So yeah, man, I think that's an important part, the team of the athlete. So yeah, so
Is his
apart
lawyer
from that,
also his agent? That's also his agent, right?
yeah, his agent, his lawyer. What I mean by that is, you see, when boxers they get contracts. Sometimes they get contracts from their promoters to sign a 5-fight deal. So you got to face this guy and that guy. We're going to give you certain amount of money for it. So his lawyer deals with the legal side of things, legal side contracts and, you know, payouts which the boxers receive, just so that they make sure that they're looking out for the fighter. You get what I'm saying? So sometimes promoters can cut a slack deal for a fighter, and, you know, I feel like that's a very important aspect when you've got someone like that that's in your team. So, you know, a lot of people don't have what Hamzah Sheeraz does have. He's very lucky in that sort of God, but, you know, at the same time, he's worked hard for everything he's achieved, and, you know, that's the fruit of his labor. So you gotta give him credit for that, because he's looked really good since going to America. You can see that in his last performance. He's got 13 knockouts in a row. You know, his last 13 fights they've all been knockouts. So you can see there's definitely something that he's doing that's right. You know?
And he also comes from a boxing family as well, right? I know that his dad is also
Can
a
you hear
referee and an
me,
amateur
bro?
coach, isn't he? Oh, are you there?
Hmm?
Oh no, I
Yeah,
was
yeah, I'm here.
asking.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was asking that his dad and his family rather comes from a long line of a boxing heritage, right? Okay, Zane is sort of cutting out a little bit here, but what I was saying in retrospect to that was that Hamza Shiraz's dad is a referee in some fights. I believe he referees both pro and amateur, and I believe that he coaches amateur and pro as well. Um, so, oh, uh, got Zane got disconnected there. We gotta wait for him to come back. So, yeah, coming from a boxing family like that, I think is really important, especially if it helps you, right? It helps when you have a group of people that sort of understand where you come from and what kind of training you have to go through. Oftentimes, it's rather difficult to deal with, let's say, having a family that may not be sympathetic or understanding to the boxing lifestyle or a combat sports lifestyle. Now, obviously, someone like Khabib, it was very good for him to be able to have the opportunity to have a dad that trains people, right? And not only that, has trained himself as a result. So we're just waiting on Zane to get back. I think he had lost a little bit of a connection there. Okay, there we go. Zane is back. All right, add to the stage. There we are. All right. So yeah, no. Before you left, I would sort of you know piggybacked off. Well, no,
Hmm?
sorry, that's a haram to say. I was piggybacking off of what you said, but we don't do no piggy around here.
No,
But
I
no, what I
sorted
was
out the
saying.
connection, so it's all good now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. Good. So
Yeah,
what I was saying was that I think it's helpful, isn't it, considering that um, well, Hamza Shiraz comes from a boxing family. I know that his dad referees both pro and amateur
yeah,
fights, and he also trains amateurs as well, right?
yeah.
And
I think personally, uh, if you're a boxer, you've got to have a good team behind you because there's a lot of things that come with being a boxer. There's a lot of sort of PR work behind the scenes to promote you. There's also like obviously contracts that fighters get offered from different promoters. So there's also other inquiries that people got to deal with personally, like day to day. So with someone like Hamza Shiraz, he's got to have that sort of team behind him because his name's getting bigger now, and he's got to have a focused team, which he does have, and a lot of fighters don't have that. So you can tell that he's got people around him that genuinely care about him. Do you understand? So I think that makes a big difference because you know all he has to do is focus on the fighting, you know, and give that 100%. Anything else he has to deal with, his team deals with that. So he doesn't have to have that worry over his head, whereas a lot of fighters aren't in that position. So, I think that will go and help him a long way during the line.
And not only that, considering that there's a wide range of corruption that goes on into boxing, and Mike Tyson will tell you himself, especially having that insane experience with Don King, right? So, from what
Yeah.
I understand, obviously, we know that Hamza Shiraz is affiliated and embedded with the Frank Warren Queensberry Promotions, right? So,
Mhm.
what was the thought process with Hamza's dad for him to let's say go with Frank Warren as opposed to let's say Eddie Hearn or any type of other promoters that are available out there?
So from what I know, um, Hamza Shiraz, he's a great fighter. He's been training since he's young. He was obviously into the sport as a kid. Um, but as far as I'm concerned, I feel because what promoters look at is if you have a good amateur career and if you went to the Olympics. If you look at Anthony Joshua, he did a lot of good things in his amateur career. Went to the Olympics, won a few gold medals, whatnot. Whereas promoters look at that, and Eddie Hearn offered Joshua a deal, but obviously in Hamza's case, he didn't have that amateur background. He had sort of like 100 fights, but nowhere near to the success level of, say, Anthony Joshua winning gold at the Olympics. He tried to go there, but they didn't allow him to come into the Olympics. And
Why
there's a
not?
lot of racism. There's a lot of racism that goes on in amateur boxing. Um,
Really? So you think
yeah,
that's what did it? Like, that's
100%
interesting.
because from what I know, he put himself out there to be a part of the Olympic team, and they didn't choose him. That it's up to the people that are in charge of the amateurs, and they get to pick and choose. So that he wasn't chosen. So in that terms, in that regard, you know, he kind of, you know, didn't have much options. But what happened was Frank Warren saw him, and he gave him that opportunity to sign with him, which was a privilege at the time because generally promoters look at fighters that have great amateur pedigrees and have achieved a lot of accolades in the amateurs. So a big shout out to Frank Warren. He gave him the opportunity when a lot of people weren't gonna give him. So it just came like that. So Frank
Whereas
Warren guy.
Yeah, whereas with Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn, it was almost like Eddie Hearn sort of it kind of fell into his lap, wouldn't you say? Like he
Mm,
had a gold medalist on his hands. He was able to market him. He was able to give him the proper fights to get him going, right? Like it just seems like
yeah.
as opposed to,
Definitely.
let's say, Frank Warren. And again, yeah, shout outs to Frank Warren, right? Like he really took the
Yeah.
risk of going with Hamzah Sheeraz as opposed
Yeah.
to, let's say, like what I said, right, with Eddie Hearn.
Hmm.
Anthony Joshua just literally fell on his lap.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. But what I do have to mention is the amateur game is very different from the pro game. So just because Hamza wasn't as successful as Anthony Joshua maybe in the amateurs, doesn't mean he won't be as successful as him in the professional ranks, because his style is suited more to a professional sort of career in boxing, and as we can see, he's got 13 knockouts in a row, 19-0 with 15 KOs, and you know he's he's at that stage where he's almost ready for world titles and world championships, and soon he'll be getting that opportunity within the next year or two, I believe. So so far so good, man. He's had a very good career, man. So a big shout out to Hamza Shiraz for going on to that.
Well, absolutely, with the first round knockout that he scored against Liam Williams, right? That was a shock to everybody. Now, we knew that it's almost like in the world of combat sports, right? There's always this veteran that is taking on the likes of prospect that is coming up. Obviously, we saw that with Anthony Joshua, as we all are looking at the screen right now with his GQ
Yeah.
magazine cover, right? We saw that with him against Klitschko. We saw that against him and some other names in
Yeah.
the gatekeeping side of boxing, right? Now,
Of
with
course.
Liam Williams, we knew
Yeah.
that this was one of those gatekeeper versus a prospect, a type of fights,
Hmm.
which means we sort of can predict that, yes, Hamza Shiraz is going to win that fight, but to win it in a very devastating fashion. I
Yeah.
mean, I did not expect that. Did you? Like, I was very much shocked at what I had saw in that fight. In all
Yeah.
honesty,
Bear with me 1 second. I'm just gonna break my fast. It's time to break fast. I'm just gonna have a
sure.
sip of.
And don't forget the dates as well, because you got to
Yeah,
break it with the dates.
I've got the dates. They're downstairs, man. So, but yeah, let's carry on. As you were saying, with Hamza Shiraz dropping Liam Williams, it was crazy because what it is a lot of people didn't expect that. You get what I'm saying? A lot of people didn't, and the reason why they didn't expect that is because Liam Williams been in there with Chris Eubank Jr., Demetrius Andrade, Liam Smith as well, and they weren't able to do what Hamza Shiraz did, and which was be so dominant, knock him out in the first round. It's unheard of. But a credit to Hamza Shiraz for training so hard and putting the sacrifices and going to America to make himself a better fighter and improve on his craft. So, wow, that was an astonishing performance, man. And I think that's one of being there ringside for most of his fights in the last couple of fights. I think that was his best career performance. As you can see, Liam Williams was shocked himself, and wow, what a brilliant performance. And I think that's going to open up a lot of doors for Hamza Shiraz. You know what I'm saying? There's talks of him being offered the opportunity in Saudi now, on the June the 1st card, 5 vs 5 match from Eddie Hearn against Frank Warren's Queensbury promotion. So have you heard of that?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a
Mm,
big one right there. That's
100%.
and he's going to be a part of that. Who is some of the names that they are throwing around for that specific fight?
There's a few names that he's been sort of linked with to the fight. First of all, I like to say there's obviously it's going to be part of Eddie Hearn's promotions. There's Amo Williams. He's an American fighter, undefeated, and that's going to be a very good fight because it's a battle of undefeated fighters. And Ammo Williams has a huge American support fan base, you know. And Sheeraz, I think, is more than capable of taking on Ammo Williams. You know, it's a dangerous fight, don't get me wrong. But Hamzah Sheeraz, I think he's got the ring IQ. He's got the fundamentals to beat Ammo Williams, where Ammo Williams is a power puncher, you know, who doesn't really use his fundamentals. You know, he's got good footwork and everything like that, but he tends to throw a lot of power shots. But it's not going to be easy for Hamzah because them short fighters sometimes can prove a difficult task against taller, rangier fighters. You get what I'm saying? But I think if Hamzah plays into his advantages over Ammo Williams, and he knows what I mean by that, so if he can do that, then I think he's going to make this fight as easy as possible. Because not only that, he's got a lot of power behind his shots. So if he can, you know, get behind his jab and, you know, slowly break Ammo Williams down, then it'll be a great fight. So Ammo Williams is one of them. A second one is Janibek, but he's in the promotional contract with Top Rank. So I think he's gonna be out of the picture for that. There's also who else? Matchroom have got. They've got Liam Smith, I think. That's another fighter that Chris Eubank Jr. fought. So he's in the mix, but I think the one that's mostly linked with Hamzah Sheeraz is Ammo Williams, and I think that's the fight that's going to happen next. So it's a big fight. It's a big step up for him as well. I think he's ready.
Do you think that Frank Warren would prefer to slow track him at this point or just catapult him into the toughest competition that he could potentially find for him?
To be honest, I think he's slowly taking his time with Hamzah Sheeraz, but I think Hamzah Sheeraz has proven he's ready with the sort of performances he's put in over the last couple of fights, and he's pretty much demolishing every sort of fighter they've put in front of him so far. So I think he's ready for a slight step up, and another step up is Ammo Williams. So Ammo Williams hasn't got the world titles, but he's an undefeated fighter, and he's a more dangerous fighter than Liam Williams. So we can see he's slowly being moved up towards world title contention. And not only that, when they were in Saudi Arabia for the Anthony Joshua fight against Ngannou, obviously there was a face-off between Janibek, who's the middleweight world champion at the moment, and he holds a lot of the belts. You know, there was a face-off between Hamzah Sheeraz and Janibek. So I think, you know, they're potentially, you know, have that fight in their mind in the next couple of fights. You know, to be honest, I don't think Hamzah Sheeraz is too far off that sort of level as well. So yeah, that's going to be the most dangerous fight, I think, for Hamzah. Because
Janet back for sure, right? Now, with Ammo Williams probably seems a lot more of the realistic initial point of view, right? In terms of like what is possible in the most current moment of time, because Janet Beck may seem like a little bit more far-fetched, at least in this current moment of time in Hamzah's career, wouldn't you say? Or is that something that's not too far off, considering considering
the thing is, I look at it in two ways. You know, when we saw Janibek fight Denzel Bentley, you know, Denzel Bentley was expected to get beaten. You know, beaten decisively. What I mean by that, get knocked out. You know, but Denzel Bentley was able to give Janibek a tough, hard fight. You know, Janibek won that fight, no doubts about it. But there was rounds where Denzel Bentley did win. You know, a few rounds, and based on that performance, you know, it made me think whether he's really as good as they make make him out to be, because Denzel Bentley, he's not a world level sort of operator. No disrespect to him, but if Denzel Bentley can do that, then Hamza Shiraz has more of a chance of beating Janibek, Uh, so in that sense, that makes me feel that he's got a chance. But in other sort of senses, where I've seen Janibek perform, maybe he had an off night that day. Usually, Janibek has got good footwork, a very good jab, good good ring IQ. You know what I mean? He knows how to switch it up. He can make adjustments. So it's a step up for Hamza Shiraz compared to what he's faced so far. And I think Amar Williams next for Hamza Shiraz will give him good preparation as to someone that moves around in the ring, someone who throws shots from different angles, Whereas Janibek does that as well. He throws different shots combinations from different sort of angles, and it will be good preparation for Hamza. But yeah, he can't take his eye off the ball, personally, in my opinion, because Janibek will definitely come up in the future. If it's not next year, it's going to be the year after because he's got the world titles. But yeah, what Hamza needs to do, in my opinion, personally, is still stay active and get as much fights under his belt as possible. Whereas Janibek right now, he's been very inactive. He's looking for the big paydays, the big fights against Canelo, Charlo, which he probably won't get, because he hasn't got a big enough fan base. He's looking for a Chris Eubank Jr. fight where he hasn't got a very big name in the world. So I think it's a high risk for Chris Eubank Jr. at his age at 33. So yeah, I think Hamza needs to be active as possible, and that'll give him a better chance to defeat Janibek, And he's the younger, fresher guy, Janibek is only getting older. So the longer he can make the fight, you know, go out for, then the better his chances, I believe, because his experience is only going to get better.
So I wanted to go back to the question with the promoter choice of Hamza Shiraz, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he went with Frank Warren because Frank Warren was willing to take on somebody that was not much of an Olympic level, boxer, right? And I tend to notice this seems to be the trajectory of the type of fighters that, let's say, Frank Warren picks up. Perhaps
Yeah.
maybe part of that is because, let's be honest, right? Frank
Mm.
Warren, for everything that we understand him to be,
Yeah.
this guy is not exactly the most polished guy in terms of his history. I mean, there's one thing that stands out to me about Frank Warren, right? Just like Don King, Frank
Hmm.
Warren is really like a street guy. If you think about
Yeah,
it, he's a
definitely.
street
I
dude,
know his upbringing is from a council estate, so he
right?
didn't. Whereas Eddie Hearn, he was sort of grown up into a family where they were very well off and were very wealthy. His dad owned Matchroom Promotions, and he passed it on to Eddie Hearn, which his dad Barry Hearn passed on to Eddie Hearn. Whereas Frank Warren, he didn't have that. He came from a tough background upbringing where he was raised up in a council estate. So they're definitely. You're right. You hit the nail on the head there when you said that he may be a street dude. Don't get it twisted. Frank Warren has been shot as well. Don't know if you know that.
Oh, yes. Very well documented. Actually, he even mentions it like a 50 Cent Many Men song. Oh, well,
Yeah,
this guy, he shot me, and then I don't know what happened. A few weeks later, he got shot down, and and I was like, yo, this sounds like a 50 Cent song, bro. You know what I mean?
yeah,
This like I was like, man, Frank Warren is literally the UK 50 Cent in the best way to really put it, right? Like,
mm,
so, but Barry, if you think about it, though, Barry really has almost the same background as Frank Warren. Once you say, like, Barry sort of had that tough upbringing as well before he was,
yeah,
a top promoter in the
before
game, wasn't
there was Matchroom or anything. Yeah, totally. I agree, definitely. But what I'm saying to you is, when Eddie Hearn was born, he was Barry Hearn was sorted in that sense financially. So I don't think that he had to go through what Frank Warren did because of the time and the time when he was born, where Barry Hearn made a name for himself, where Frank Warren didn't have that. He had to make his company by himself, the hard way.
Yeah,
Whereas
definitely.
Eddie inherited it from Barry Hearn.
Yeah. Now, switching gears a little bit, right? The other guy that we sort of highlight in this particular stream and this particular story is
Yeah.
Adam Azim, right?
Mm,
Now, this guy seems to be a young phenom in a way where, how old is he now? Only 20 years old, right?
yeah.
What was
21,
it
20.
like?
Yeah.
21? Wow. What was it like
Mm,
meeting this guy? What was
to be honest,
what
like
like what was it what's he like?
when
Like
I met
as in a
uh,
person.
when I met Adam Azim, it was at a time where I wasn't expecting to meet him. It wasn't planned, and I was going towards Hamzah Sheeraz fight, and what it is when I was going towards the Hamzah Sheeraz fight, I was going towards the entrance, and I saw a guy next to me. He was walking with a few of his other guys, and he had a look at me, and then I didn't think nothing of it. But then I looked back at him, and then I realized this is Adam Azim, and then I went up to him. I said, "Yo, what's happening? You're right. You Adam Azim, right?" He's like, "Yeah." And then I was just like, "Wow, it's an honor to meet you. You've made me loads of money with your fights in the past, so I appreciate that." And he was like, "No, it's all good, man." And then I was like, "Yeah, man, I respect what you're doing. You're gonna be a future star." And what it is when I said that, he's like, "Nah, these are the future stars." So he just pointed out some of the people that was with him. They were young, and they were obviously a little bit younger than him. So he was saying that these are the guys that are going to be in the future. So he was a very humble guy. He didn't really think a lot of himself. He obviously bigged up his people that were with him, um, giving them credit instead of him. So I respect that, man, and he came across as a really humble guy in that sense. First impressions count, so you know it was nice to meet him because he came across as definitely a humble guy, a guy that's not very egotistic, as a fighter.
Seems very level-headed as
100%.
well.
Yes. Very good
Well,
guy, man. And yeah, you can see he's on one of the biggest platforms, Sky Sports Boxing, and they're promoting him very highly.
now he's with what's the promoter that he's with? Is it with that not with Boxer, right? It's with
Ben
another
Shalom.
promotion. Ben Shalom. Okay, so it is
Mm,
Boxer. Okay. What
yeah.
had prompt him to go with Ben Shalom as opposed to, let's say, the other names that we've mentioned? Considering now that there's a lot of top promoters in the UK, right? Before it was
Yeah.
the United States, you had Golden Boy, you had Top Rank, and then you had, among other promotions as well, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
the Don King Promotions was a big
Mm,
time for its time, but now obviously that fell off. But while a lot of these other American companies sort of started falling off, it was
right.
like this rise of the British promotion. Right
Mm,
now, before it was just Eddie Hearn. He was starting out in 2013 and 14. He came out with that big fight with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn came out with that big fight with Carl Froch and
yeah.
George Groves. Then they went into the stadium, and then it was just shortly after he got
Mm,
Anthony Joshua in that mix. Anthony Joshua became a big star, and then after that, there was sort of this time where he didn't. It's not like he fell off, right? Because if you're a top boxing promoter, you never fall off. But there was that time where
yeah.
obviously Joshua lost the belts, and then a few of his fighters lost. I remember, I believe it was McDonough, that one guy that fought in Japan against Inoue, right? He flew out
Yeah.
there. So that was sort of a big
Mhm.
loss for his company. But then they started
Mm,
coming back up. And then all of a sudden he
yeah.
signs Canelo. And after that, now you have Frank Warren. He wasn't too far away from that. Now you have Boxer. And now you have all these other promotions in the UK now. I mean, like, what do you attribute this rise of these promotions that are popping up in the UK right now?
Yeah, you're right, man. I think what it is a lot of fighters. There's a lot of fighters out there which are not signed to any promotional companies. I think that's where it's sort of bringing a lot of other promotional companies instead of the big ones like and Matchroom and Queensbury. So there's still a lot of fighters that haven't been signed. So I think these smaller promotional companies are the ones that are giving the opportunities to the fighters that don't have that. And in terms of Adam Azim, I think when he signed with Boxer, um, not only that, they had a platform with Sky Sports. And I feel that Adam Azim thought, he could make the most of it, by promoting him on Sky Sports, because Sky Sports, it was a big boxing promotional platform, But I can't speak for Adam himself, but I feel like he was going to be promoted more than other people when he took the opportunity to go with Boxer, because a lot of promotional companies sometimes they don't have the platform to promote their fighters, whereas Boxer they got Sky Sports underneath them, and now we can see that he's headlining shows, and he's getting opportunities to fight other sort of fighters that are on different sort of promotional companies. Like recently, he was mandated to fight Dalton Smith once he won the EBU title. I think Dalton Smith is you know, a very different sort of challenge for Adam Azim, because he's the more experienced fighter. He's more older than him, and he's had that experience at being at world level. Whereas Adam Azim, he's still young, but he needs that experience. So there's a lot of people that are, quick to write him off. But I don't think he deserves the criticism he's getting right now. To be fair.
What are some of the criticisms that he's getting in the current moment of time?
So obviously he's obviously got the EBU title, and the EBU have mandated Dalton Smith to be his next opponent. But boxing is a business at the end of the day. There are two British fighters, and there's a time and place for fights to happen. And I feel that Adam Azim hasn't had that experience yet of fighting someone like Dalton Smith, who's just beaten a world-class fighter and looked very impressive in doing so in Jose Zepeda. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. What sort
But I
of
think
problems do you see Dalton Smith presenting towards Adam Azim?
Dalton Smith is a very, very good counter puncher. And he's got very good timing. Timing sometimes, most of the time, beats speed in boxing. Adam Azim's got very good speed, but the timing of Dalton Smith's shots, uh, which makes it more dangerous for him, because we saw in the Zepeda fight he timed a really good body shot uh, on Jose Zepeda, and he wasn't really rushing to do that. He was taking his time, and he calculated it to perfection, and he knocked out Zepeda, which Zepeda hadn't been knocked out in a while. And he fought Richardson Hitchens, a guy who fought yesterday. Richardson Hitchens weren't able to do that as well. So I think Dalton Smith is a very dangerous fight for Adam Azim at this moment in time. But I still feel that Adam Azim has the potential to win this fight. But what it is it's more of a PR disaster. Like, I just think that his team should have addressed the situation, but they were just being quiet about it. And now he's gone on to face Harlem Eubank, you know, which is Chris Eubank's brother. He's received a lot more criticism after that because it seems like to the British public, because he didn't, no one in his team addressed the reason why he didn't face Dalton Smith in particular. It seems like it's a disaster at the moment because you're saying you want to fight Dalton Smith, but you're not fighting him, and then you go on to fight Harlem Eubank, who's obviously 30 years old, and Dalton Smith is 29 years old, and you're fighting him instead of your your mandatory. You know what I mean? But with Harlem Eubank, it is a step up for Adam Azim as well. But I think that definitely Dalton Smith was the harder fight to take. So, you know, you got to give credit to Adam Azim for taking the fight against Harlem Eubank as well, because that's a great fight in itself. But I just think the way his team handled the situation, it's not really good because it's made him look bad, you know. And I feel sorry for him because, you know, he's not a bad kid. And the thing is with Adam, he'll fight anyone, but it's just the way it's come out that his team hasn't really addressed the issue, you know?
Yeah. I think anything with boxing, you're always
Mm,
going to have a certain level of, let's say, hesitation on taking certain matchups, which, by the
mm,
way, I got to tell you, this is sort of like the biggest debate when it comes to, in particular, Khabib, right? In the world of mixed martial arts. You see,
mm,
one of the biggest criticism that Khabib has faced is when his record of his early career started to surface. And reason being is
right.
because, well, he sort of took the boxing route. And what do I mean by that for those that may not understand fully the context of what exactly that means? Well, in the beginning of your career, especially if you have a big backing or if you have, let's say, a father who was part of the sport or somebody that is embedded in the sport, they're usually going to guide you through, well, easier matchups in the very beginning. But here's the argument that I have for that to play advocacy for that particular style of promotion or that style of setting up a career trajectory for a fighter. I think there's some good merits to that because I think you have to be able to understand how to dominate an opponent, right? In order for you to really understand how to fight the harder fights. In other words, sort of start you off easy, sort of like what you
Mm,
call training wheels. You know, when a kid first starts learning how to ride a bike, you give them
yeah,
training wheels. And then after a while, they start getting comfortable balancing themselves on a bike and you won't need training wheels anymore.
yeah, that's a
So
perfect
I think,
example.
yeah, I think that that's really the best approach if you really want to make a top level fighter, especially at a world level. And
Yeah,
with Khabib, to use that same example, I think that when he got into the UFC, it was just absolute, taking all comers type of mentality. But he had to have gotten there first in a term of, well, having to face some of the easier guys and then leading on to fighting the tougher guys later on, right? That's sort of
mm,
what Khabib did. So he started
yeah,
off fighting guys that what you would call journeymen. And by the
yeah,
way, shout outs to Tommy Jacobs, right? He is I don't know if you know him, he's from Essex. He's a former Olympian. He was the captain of the British national team during Amir Khan's era, right? He
right,
fights out of Essex. So I have a conversations with this guy about what journeyman boxers are like in the UK or elsewhere. Man, I got to tell you, it is quite shocking, but at the same time, I'm not surprised when I found out what it is in terms of what's behind journeyman boxers, right?
right.
They're
Mm,
very much the backbone of the sport of boxing. And for one, I think that having those fights early on really gives you those rounds and really puts you at a
yeah,
top level, which is the type of fights that Khabib had.
mm.
But then
You need that
once,
experience.
right. But then once he got into UFC, it was like, all right, I'll fight anybody anytime. But in order for you to get to that, I'll fight anybody anytime, you have to be able to put in that time first with a little bit of an easier, outings, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where the hesitation may be for both Adam Azim and for Hamzah Sheeraz. And plus, look, Frank Warren is an old school boxing guy. Ben Shalom, obviously, he's new to the game, but I think he understands boxing to a sense where this is what you have to do. Kind of
Mm.
slow track your guy a little bit. But then the other
At the
aspect
same
of that,
Yeah, at the same time, what people need to understand that promoters are in this game to make money, and boxing's turned more into a business. Whereas back in the days, it was more of the best fighting the best, but now it's all about business. So the way you perceive your fighter to fight and the way you build up your fighter, that's how you're going to make the most money, you know? Because if you're going to throw a fighter in the deep end straight away, and for example, they were to take a loss, it will be detrimental to your your earnings and how much you can make off the fighter. And not only that is how much the fighter can make from themselves, you know? So it's a business as well. People need to understand that.
yeah, 100%. And I think that with the UFC, this is sort of where they have a hard time building their stars. And Frank
Mm,
Warren himself has mentioned this plenty of times over and over again, where he criticizes sort of the promotional style of the UFC, right? He says, well, there's no stars in the UFC because, their guys are constantly losing fights, the top names. And he's right about this, right? I could
mm,
name a lot of examples to where they have, let's say, a pretty baby face type of marketing machine type of fighter, right?
mm,
Sage Northcutt is a great example of that. Earlier than that, there was this fighter named Roger Huerta, who, by the way, was one of the first Latin superstars in mixed martial arts. A little history about Roger Huerta, right? He's been in a lot of magazines back in the days. I'm talking about like '06, '07. This is when the UFC and MMA was really trying to get their foot in the door of the mainstream world. And lo and behold, he sort of had some bad outings one after another. But this guy was just like an absolute superstar, right? He could have been the Canelo of mixed martial arts, but because of the way that the UFC sort of marketed themselves as the best fight the best. And by the way, there's a reason for that, by the way, why they have this aspect of, the best fight the best is because they want the product to be a lot bigger than the individual athlete.
mm,
Okay, so even though Roger Huerta back in the days was an absolute superstar,
mm,
still, really, the UFC was the bigger star of it all. And back then, people knew what the UFC was, they knew what MMA was. But
mm.
for you to know a specific name, you'd have to only be a hardcore fan. That's the reason why I know of him, is because I'm a hardcore fan. But obviously, he's also known for sort of beating up a football player that beat up a woman in the streets in Texas. And yeah, he was sort of on TMZ because of that. So that's sort of another thing that he, was known for, right?
Oh,
But
wow.
either way, in his heyday, the guy was an absolute, he was just an absolute superstar to the highest order. So,
Yeah.
but the career trajectory that he had took on, especially in the UFC, it's not the way that it is in boxing. He took a lot of losses that I think was just based on the fact of the kind of competition that he was facing,
Yeah.
and
But
that's just really the
I
reality
do
of the
respect
sport.
the UFC, the
So
best
maybe,
fight the best. I do like the fact that UFC fighters, the best fight the best, you know? There's no nonsense in that sort of sense. As a fan, it's more pleasing, you know? But you see, with boxing, it's
well,
turned more into a business. But I do like
right,
that
right.
about best fight the best.
But it is because of the fact that well, you as a fan, so get this, right? I think most boxing fans, in particular, we can use this same example too with MMA and the UFC, but most boxing fans, I would be bold to say, as they love boxing more than, let's say, an individual athlete. Is that fair to say? Like when we're talking about the average boxing fan, is that fair to say that they love
Yeah,
the sport
yeah,
of
yeah,
boxing?
100%. 100%. Yeah, you hit the
So
nail on the head.
so that means they want to see the best fight the best, right? And with
Yeah.
that, you also got to understand the human elements of this whole entire thing, right? For example, let's take into consideration, let's say if you have a son or a daughter or a relative that is fighting, right? Now, would you want your son or your daughter to fight the
Mm.
hardest fight out there in their first time out? And I think most reasonable and rational minded families and and people that have children, I think they're going to say no. That's not what I want to do. And again, Conor McGregor has criticized Khabib's career before, right? He even said, yeah, those promotion that Khabib fought early on, his father was the promoter of those fights.
All
Sort of
right.
in a way slagging him off. But guess what? That's, I guess, what you do if you're a father, a concerned father, right? You're not going to put Khabib out there against, I don't know, whoever the top guy was when he started his career at 155.
No,
Let's say, Takanori Gomi, right? He was probably the top 155er when Khabib started his career. You're not going to put him in there with him in his first fight.
no, you're not
You
gonna
know,
do that, man.
so
It's
that's the
just
human element of trying to understand this. And the human element sort of takes the aspect of, well, okay, we're going to give individual care to this person. But this is what I mean. When you are the UFC as a product, there is no individual of holding hands and trying to coddle this person. Now, for
mm,
example, right? Khabib's manager, Ali Abdelaziz, he has
yeah,
a fighter that is currently going to be signed into UFC. Her name is Kayla Harrison. She is an
right,
Olympic gold medalist judo player, right? She's a former PFL champion. And
right.
she now recently signed to the UFC. And guess what? She's fighting this week in the big grand mark event of UFC 300. Guess who
Oh,
she's fighting in her first UFC fight?
who's she fighting?
Holly
I'm not sure.
Holly Holmes, the girl
Oh,
that
yeah.
knocked out Ronda Rousey in Australia,
Oh, wow. That's a big fight, man. Why is she
right?
gonna take that straight away?
Why is she going to take that? Because the UFC does not care that you're Kayla Harrison, the gold medalist Olympic judo for America, because they don't care. That's why.
No, that's good,
Now
bro.
she's the heavy favorite because you got to take
Yeah,
into consideration Holly Holmes, who's, by the way, who's also a former boxing champion before she was a former MMA champion. She was the first human being, never mind male female dynamics, first human being ever to win a major world championship in MMA and boxing, right? And she did that by knocking out Ronda Rousey. So, yeah, that's who Kayla Harrison is going to fight in her first fight in the UFC.
wow.
Now, obviously, she's a top level, world level pro MMA fighter, but
Mm,
there's world level MMA and then there's the UFC. You know what I'm
mm,
saying? Just
yeah,
like this weekend. This weekend, there was Johnny, Johnny Walker, right? Are you familiar with Johnny Walker?
yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay,
I know
so
you're
he's that
talking.
tall Brazilian guy. He trains in Conor McGregor's team. He's a
Yeah,
205er, very big guy, long hair, Brazilian dude, likes to dance a lot. So his brother, Walter Walker, was
yeah,
an undefeated heavyweight coming into the UFC. He won 5 world titles outside of the UFC, right?
right.
He comes into
Mm,
the UFC. He took his
yeah.
first loss against a guy who's on a 3-fight losing streak.
Mm.
A
Oh, wow.
five-time, a fight. So let me repeat this to those that haven't heard it. Right, a 5-time world MMA champion in 5 different organizations outside of the UFC. And by the way, these are all world level MMA. Took his
Oh wow,
first loss against a guy who was on a 3-fight losing streak, but has UFC experience.
wow.
You see what I'm saying? This is what you're dealing with in the UFC. So the other stream that I did for UFC 300 a couple of days ago, the theme that I
Yeah,
was sort of getting at is this could be a card full of upsets, right? Obviously, Charles
right.
Oliveira could potentially upset the upcoming Armin Sarukian. And by the way, how about this? Armin Sarukian, right? He is a 155 fighter. When he debuted in UFC back in 2019, guess who his first fight was? Islam Makhachev.
No way. He must have lost that fight.
debut. He did, but he gave Islam Makhachev a pretty hard fight. They went to the scorecards, of course, but
Okay.
now he has a chance to fight a former champion, a guy that Islam Makhachev beat for the belt. And guess what? If he wins that, then he can show how much he's improved since their first fight. But this is the UFC in a nutshell in the subject that we're talking about with taking harder fights early on, right? Because their whole entire aspect is to build the brand, not build the individual. And this is why
Yeah.
I say that for boxing fans, I mean, real boxing fans, they're not really, unless, of course, they're like yourself, who's embedded with Hamzah Sheeraz, embedded with Adam Azim, embedded with these types of people. You're not going to have an attachment to anyone,
No.
right? Like the average boxing fan is just not, unless you know these guys. So
Personally, yeah.
your attachment is to the sport of boxing. So therefore, you want to see the best fight the best. But if you have an attachment to a specific individual, you're going to tell them behind the scenes, hey, dog, don't take this fight. This dude will rock your snot box. And even Tyson Fury's dad told him, don't go in there against Deontay Wilder. And we all know what happened afterwards. Obviously, Tyson Fury won that one, but nonetheless, he still though, he was worried, and rightfully so. So that's sort of the issue that I think fans versus people who are actually individuals that are embedded in the sport sort of have a problem with understanding the difference of those dynamics.
No, but what it is I respect the UFC because the best fight the best, and like you said, the UFC is bigger than the fighter. Whereas you see more UFC fans than boxing fans. I think UFC has a bigger following than boxing because of that. So it's great for the fans.
Do you honestly think so? I'm a little skeptical about that notion that
Oh, really?
that UFC. Yeah, I am just a little bit, only because boxing is older, and I think that when you have a sport that's older, okay. So for example, right, what is the biggest sport in America? They say that America's favorite pastime is baseball, right?
Oh,
Yeah. The reason why they say what was that?
no, I was agreeing with you.
Oh, yeah. The reason why I said baseball is a big, a big popular sport in America is because of the fact that baseball is old. It's a very old sport. So therefore, there's going to be generational interest, right? You go to, let's say, a baseball game in Yankee Stadium, right? More than likely, there's going to be a family that has been generationally fans of the New York Yankees. Their grandfathers were fans, their great-grandfathers were fans, and now their children are fans. Well, this is sort of what I notice in boxing, and especially I see it with the Hispanic community in America, right?
Yeah.
Because boxing is so old, I believe that there is a huge portion of people that are sort of generational fans, right? So with MMA, I sort of feel like, okay, there are individuals that are going to love MMA because naturally it's a brutal, violent sport that sort of offers an action-packed night, when it
Yeah.
comes to the entertainment value that you get out of it. But when I think of like generational fandom, I just don't see it, because if you're going to have a family that's all into mixed martial arts, it's more than likely because of the reason that, okay, well, his dad was a judo artist, his dad was a
Yeah.
karate champion, his great grandfather was a jujitsu master, his great grandfather or grandfather was a judo guy, and now my son is a wrestler. So I think that the only people that have generational interest in mixed martial arts are those people that have these backgrounds in these particular sports, which sort of, again, I think they are a minority. In comparison to boxing fans, you can meet a Puerto Rican family that will tell you, well, we watched Felix Trinidad all the way to Miguel Cotto, and now my son and his father, grandfather are now fans of Edgar Berlanga, right? You can sort of see that with Mexican fans as well. Let's say they were fans of Julio Cesar Chavez, right? So that same grandfather who's a fan of Julio Cesar Chavez, his son and his other son and grandson are now going to be fans of Canelo. And then after Canelo, they're all going to be fans of David Benavidez. This is why I think that, boxing is still more popular than MMA, because I got to tell you, like, whenever I'll tell you this, every time I run across one of my friends that are currently active in fighting MMA, right? The first thing that casuals or people that don't know anything about fighting ask them, are you a boxer? You know what I mean? Like, that's what they ask them. Oh, you're a boxer. No, I'm an MMA fighter. What's that? What's MMA? And then you got to explain to them you're a martial artist. Oh, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. But guess what? Boxing is also a martial arts, but they don't understand that. They just know that boxing is a fighting sport. So therefore, I think I think that's my theory on why I think boxing is a lot more popular in a worldwide sense. Now, in America, I'll be very honest about this. In America, I think MMA has now surpassed boxing in America. But if you go into UK, in your neck of the woods, I don't think you can confidently say that, even though you have a lot of top British mixed martial arts fighters, I honestly don't think you can say with confidence that boxing is less than MMA in the UK. In fact, I think that it is with more confidence as to say that boxing is the main staple fighting sport of the United Kingdom. Right?
No,
Think about this, right? The top journalist in MMA for the UK is Pete Carroll. No, I'm sorry. What's that guy's name? Nick Pete and what was that other? Adam Cattrall. You know these guys, right? From the Fight Disciples.
Yeah.
So these guys are the biggest journalists for UFC UK, but they're boxing guys. Think about this. The biggest journalist for the United Kingdom's UFC media are boxing guys, and with good reason.
Yeah. See, I wouldn't have known that as well. It's crazy.
Yeah. They are originally boxing guys. Now, do they know their MMA? Absolutely. They know their MMA, but their background is boxing first when it comes to media and the sport that they've practiced on their own. They're boxing guy first. And I think the reason for that is because what the UFC is trying to do, and this is the model that they've always been trying to do when they broke into the UK market back in the mid 2000s. What they are trying to do is attract a fighting audience that is already embedded into boxing and just slide right in there and say, yeah, we're UFC, MMA, we're just like you. You know what I
Mm.
mean? We're a fighting sport. We're fighting men. So they slide right in there and say, yeah, this is who we are. You know, so it's an easy transition for the UFC to sort of garner that market.
Mm.
And
No, definitely.
again, the UK is generationally huge when it comes to their fan base in boxing, because let's be real, right? The reason why someone like you is absolutely obsessed with boxing, I think, has to do with being the fact that you grew up in a UK culture, right? This is just, this is just what it is. Now, if
Uh,
you grow up, let's say in Florida, by the way, Florida is a very big MMA uh, section of the world. Out here in Sacramento, too, Sacramento is damn near an MMA town. You know, this is the reason why I live here, because there's a lot of great MMA gyms here, a lot of great jiu-jitsu places, Muay Thai, all that. You know, we're a big hub, but we're also a big boxing hub, and I think that comes from just naturally being an MMA town. You know, shout out to Kane Sandoval. He's one of our up and coming boxers that's in this area. That guy Blake, I believe he fought in the Thriller card, in the Roy Jones card, and whatnot. So we got some, and obviously Andre Ward. How can I forget Andre Ward? Right, Northern California guy. Right,
mm.
so obviously that's going to lend itself to that. But here, yes, MMA is the more prevalent sport, right? And also Southern Florida is also a prevalent MMA hub. Another example it is, I'll give you an example, right? Remember Johnny Depp, right? Obviously he was big in the news with Amber Heard, right? You know,
Yeah.
one of the earlier roles that Amber Heard did was the movie Never Back Down, which was one of the first MMA movies that was featured on a major film screen. So basically, it's a Karate Kid style type of storyline, right? A
Okay.
kid from the Midwest moves down to Florida. Everybody in Florida is all into the whole MMA scene,
Mm.
this and that. I remember in the sequel to Never Back Down, there
Mm.
was this boxer, right? In the fictional story, right? This boxer, he's trying to transition into MMA. And it was so cheesy because he runs across these girls that were like reading an MMA magazine, right? And then these
Oh.
girls were like, ooh, MMA fighters, they're so hot, this and that. They're way more hotter than the boxing guys. Ooh. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cheesy. But that's kind of like the quintessential attitude that a lot of people have, depending on what region you have. But in the
Oh.
UK,
Mm.
obviously it's a boxing country. I think people are going to be a lot more impressed with, oh, you're a boxer. Okay, that's awesome. Whereas opposed to like, well, I'm a cage fighter. I'm like, well, what is that? And you look at Michael Kelly, he made fun of MMA by saying, I don't watch sports with guys taking off their shoes. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, that's how you view it? I'm like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean? But that's what I mean. People have a different view of how they look at certain sports and whatnot. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what it is. So, I guess that's kind of the long-winded answer that I had for saying why I think boxing is still more popular uh in in uh
Mm.
in more parts of the world than it is with MMA. I mean, obviously MMA is popping up, but not in not in a worldwide level. Obviously Brazil is big in MMA is big with Brazil. I think Brazilians love MMA more than they love boxing, but obviously that's
Oh.
because of the Gracie family.
But
Uh
my question to you, bro, as a being a MMA guy, what did you think about the Joshua versus Ngannou fight? The second time Ngannou fought in a boxing match.
So I tell you what, the first time we had this conversation, right? One of the first things that I told you was that not all boxing versus MMA boxing matches are all equal, right? And
Yeah.
the reason why this didn't surprise me as much is because Anthony Joshua has insane levels of attributes, right?
Yeah.
He's strong, he's fast, and he's highly athletic. Well,
Yeah.
Francis Ngannou is also strong, fast, and athletic. So we can say they're both equal in that, right?
Yeah.
Now that they're both equal in that, it cancels out the attributes. I'm not talking about skills though, right? I'm just talking about attributes. Because they're equal in attributes, it cancels out the skill, it cancels out the attributes of Francis Ngannou, and it allows the skills of Anthony Joshua to show.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So in other words, they're both strong, they're both fast, but the both strong and two fast guys, one of them is more technical, and that's Anthony Joshua. Hence why it did not surprise me that Anthony Joshua was able to do him in like that. Now, with Tyson Fury, the reason why we saw what we saw, and a lot of people are going to coin that as to say, well, you know what? That was nothing more than Tyson Fury not training for the fight. Not so fast. I don't know if I buy that, because I can tell that Tyson Fury really put in a lot of effort in that fight. The problem is Tyson Fury does not have the attributes that Francis Ngannou has, but he had to rely 100% on skills. And that is why the fight looked like the way that it did. But when you have two bulls heading in a collision course against each other, it just so happens that the other bull in Anthony Joshua was the much more skilled guy.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, you got to take into consideration Anthony Joshua was also an Olympian. So
Yeah.
he's had all these experiences that he can
Mm.
really use against Francis Ngannou. So what
Yeah.
Francis Ngannou was trying to do was use skills and attributes to try and beat Anthony Joshua. But the problem was the attributes were equal, but the skills were not. So that's sort of
Yeah.
what my take on that matter, in terms of not really being surprised by the performance of
Mm.
Anthony Joshua. What do
Right.
you
Do
think?
you do
What
you
was
think
going through your mind when you saw that?
personally, to be honest, like I thought Joshua was gonna do him in, but at the same time there was that level of vulnerability because Tyson Fury, obviously personally I think Ngannou won that fight. He beat Tyson Fury, I believe, but there was obviously that vulnerability going in with that Joshua fight that, there may be there may be an upset on the cards because we didn't expect Ngannou to, put up such a fight and drop Tyson Fury, you know what I mean? But I did think, like you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head where, you said Joshua has been more experienced in terms of being an amateur gold Olympic medalist, and that definitely did make the difference with the sort of experience he's been in with levels of fighters.
Which
And
made the attributes of Francis Ngannou insignificant.
I just think like he was a bit too stiff, footwork. I think that was very important sort of indicator to see how the fight would go. And based on the last fight where he fought Fury, he didn't really use his legs that much. He had power, but he didn't really move around in the ring as fluidly like Joshua. Do you know what I mean? Which gave Joshua angles and combinations to target, and he was landing that overhand right, and Ngannou couldn't seem to get out the way of it due to his footwork and him just being there. But it comes with experience. I mean, you can't just go into a sport and just fight the best sort of guys. You're probably most likely gonna get knocked out, like what happened. But I really respect Ngannou for what he did, and you know he's really a credit to the sport of the UFC. Because he did put up a really good fight against Tyson Fury, although he did get knocked out. But going on from this, do you think he's still going to carry on having boxing fights? What do you
Well,
think? Because
his
you
next
saw in
fight
the
is going to be in MMA. The president of the PFL, the new promotion that he signed to outside of the UFC, is sort of bringing him back for an MMA fight. Right now, obviously, there's no mandatory sanctioning bodies like you have with the WBA, WBC, and all of that in boxing. But it's almost like let me make sure my mic is on here. Hold on a second.
That's fine.
Okay, there we go. All right. So, yeah, they're asking him to come back to fight MMA because obviously it is sort of weird that they signed him in an MMA contract only to box, right? Well, here's the thing. They're asking him to come back in the summertime against a 6'8" Brazilian. And let me tell you, I don't like this one bit because, to be quite honest with you, what's going on here is damage Francis Ngannou. I've said this plenty of times, right? I think the Floyd fight with Conor McGregor damaged him in his prime for MMA. Right now, a lot of people are thinking, man, Mayweather has pillow hands or this and that. I don't know about that, man. If you saw the way that Floyd was punching on Conor's head, it was quite concerning, right? A boxer is a boxer in terms of the punches that they can throw. And quite frankly, there's a reason why they spend more hours than we do in MMA in terms of their hands. So get this, right? Michael Bisping, you know him, right? UK MMA, UFC legend. So his coach, Jason Perillo, he comes from a boxing background. He eventually became an MMA trainer because he learned MMA, right? But he was a boxer first. So Michael Bisping said that Jason Perillo, the way that he throws his hands, it is nothing like I've ever seen out of a UFC fighter. And this is a coach, by the way. This is a coach who's also a middle-aged man, right? He says that the way that he hits, it's nothing that I've ever seen out of a fighter from, his weight class in MMA. And there's a good reason for that. So the way that Floyd was landing those punches on McGregor, I think it is the same reason why you were able to see Khabib throw that overhand right in their fight and knock him down. Whereas prior to that, Conor McGregor was never knocked down before. At least not like that. That's why we considered him the best boxer in MMA because of that reason. But Khabib hits him with an overhand right, and he goes down immediately. And by the way, shout outs to Khabib, but we all know Khabib is not Arthur Beterbiev, even though he looks like him. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like for Khabib to do that to you with a discipline that you're good at, I think only shows a little bit of damage. So going back to Francis Ngannou, he's going to be badly damaged in his next MMA fight. And he's taking on a 6'8" Brazilian. Yeah,
definitely, man. It's going to be tough.
This dude just came off of a 30-second knockout in the PFL versus Bellator Saudi Arabia card, right? So he took on this Bellator champion by the name of Ryan Bader. He was also a former UFC light heavyweight contender, which is, by the way, the cruiserweight division of the UFC. But he was a contender in that. He was a champion in Bellator. And now that 6'8" Brazilian, Renan Ferreira, knocked him out in 30 seconds. And this is the guy Francis Ngannou is going to fight in the summer. In the summer, while Francis Ngannou is still recovering from what this beast right here in this GQ magazine did to him. You know what I mean? Like he's going back into the cage after this guy just put it on him.
Yeah. No, it was a brutal knockout, though. So, yeah, no, I do get where you're coming from.
His prime is done in MMA. Never mind boxing. I think that, which is a shame because we never, I think the most ideal that you wanted to see out of Francis Ngannou was him fight John Jones. Healthy. 100%. Now, I have no doubt in my mind John Jones would have absolutely demolished him. Now, I'm not talking about before the Anthony Joshua fight. I think Anthony Joshua damaged him to the point where I would be full 100% confident that John Jones would win against him. And by the way, speaking of John Jones, did you hear about what happened with him and a drug tester that came to his house. Do you hear about that?
I heard something, but not the entire story. But yeah, just repeat
Okay.
what happened.
So I have a video on it. I sort of give, well, not so much of the breakdown of what happened, but sort of my opinion on the social matters at hand, right? I basically talk about how, some authority figures can be absolute Karens and how they sometimes
Right.
overstep their boundaries. So the two drug testers that are, by the way, assigned from the UFC, right? You got to keep in mind, these drug testers, they're not the government. They're not the police. Okay, this is
Right.
very important to understand. What they are private contractors. So why does
Yeah.
the UFC hire private contractors to do drug testing? I'm going to tell you why. For one, it's to make the sport look legit because they want to be in the level of the Olympics, right? It makes the sport look legit. Number two, it's an insurance policy. So in case somebody gets hurt inside the cage, they can say, well, these are the precautions that we took. We hired a drug testing company in order to make sure our athletes are safe. And that would have to include drug testing. So, in other words, they're not cops. This is very important to understand because I got to tell you, a lot of people that are not from the United States who are fighters of the UFC, they often think of these people like they are the police, right? They're not.
Yeah.
So John knows this because obviously John's an American fighter. Not only that, John was going to be a cop before he was going to go into the UFC, which is insane, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was going to be a cop, but because you got to understand, his dad was a preacher, right? So he did everything right his whole entire life. He even snitched on his college roommates who were smoking weed. Okay,
No way.
yes, bro. He admitted this. He admitted this. This self-righteous, of a man. He went and admitted this. He said, "Yeah, I went and told on my college roommates who were smoking weed because he wanted to be a cop. He wasn't sure if he was going to go into fighting. He was that was his next career trajectory was he was going to go be a police officer." Which is weird because obviously when John became famous and became a world champion, all of a sudden he started getting in trouble with the law, right? So it's very far off from what we know John Jones to be. So so he knows this. So he understands the law. He understands that these people are not the police. So they go into his house, right? Because this is what the drug testers do. They come in randomly. He's drunk because he's celebrating a friend's birthday and he decided he was going to host it at his house, right? So they all show up. John is drunk and he's being belligerent because he doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't understand why these drug testers are here randomly. And on top of that, he's a little bit inebriated. So his judgment level is just way out there. So they ask him to pee in the cup. He's sort of being uncooperative. And you can take that in different ways, right? Are you hiding something or you just don't want to pee in that current moment of time or whatever, right? Yeah. Here's another thing about John Jones. When the pee testers came in to get his sample, he hid under a cage in his gym. You know what I'm saying? He hid under a cage for an entire 12 hours. You remember when the Undertaker used to come out of the ring when he went under the ring and then he poked the hole and then he came out and the fire started coming out. It was like that. The Undertaker had to wait under the ring for a certain amount of hours before he would come out and do that in a matchup, right? So that's why people kind of joke around and call John the Undertaker in that aspect. So he hid under a cage. Right under a ring of a cage just to hide from the drug testers that showed up at his gym. And they were staying there until the gym closed down. And they're like, all right, well, let's leave. Let's go look for him elsewhere. Because the reason why they went to that place is because you have to tell them your whereabouts. Right? So, okay, I'm training at this time. Okay, that's the kind of information they got. They're like, all right, he's going to be training at this time, so we'll wait here. So they waited there all day, and he hid under the cage. So again, if you're hiding under the cage and you don't want to pee, you're hiding something, right? It has to be. So these drug testers, and this was, by the way, years ago. I'm not talking about the recent incident. So this lady, was sort of getting a little bit belligerent, right? The drug testers. And so John said, he's like, you know what I do to people, right? And what he was referencing when he said what I do to people was John shot at people before that came into his house, because John is strapped up. He's got all types of automatic weapons, shotguns, this and that. And then plus New Mexico is a state that is very lax with their gun laws. So he can have all the guns in the world. You can even buy a tank if you can afford it, right? That's the kind of place New Mexico is. Obviously, out here in California, we have a little bit more of stricter gun laws than other states. So she felt threatened, and she went to the police as a result of it. By the way, the UFC was telling her, hey, don't go to the police, right? We're not trying to have our big star, get cuffed up. You know what I mean? That's not good for business. You can't lock up John. She went to the police anyway, because she said that she felt threatened. So that's what's going on with, with John Jones. But check out my video on that one for more information. Obviously, it is, my latest video that I uploaded on, on this channel. So yeah, I have a little bit more information on that one. So yeah, what do you think, man? What do you think of that story?
Yeah, it's crazy that he told me he was hiding in his gym for 12 hours or so.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. Obviously, if you're hiding, then you must have something to hide yourself if you don't want to, pee in the cup, or, you don't want to cooperate with them. So it does make me feel like he's guilty of something. But I
Right.
guess we'll never know.
Wait, what was that last part you said?
I said, I guess we'll never know completely 100% what he was hiding. I mean, has he
Oh, no.
been tested in the past and been caught with
Okay, so
illegal?
get this, right? Remember, so this sort of ties into Conor Benn, right? Which
Yeah,
is very interesting, by the way, right? The Conor Benn situation.
yeah,
Didn't they move a fight? Weren't they trying to move a fight for Conor Benn, right? When he
mm,
popped for a test, were they trying to look for a
yeah,
different jurisdiction to sort of get the fight going? So get this.
yeah.
I believe it was in December of 2018, 2019.
Mm,
John Jones rematches the training partner of Khamzat Chimaev, the legendary Alexander Gustafsson, right? And why I
yeah.
call him legendary was because their first fight together was absolutely legendary. He took John to the scorecards and gave John two bruising eyes and a busted up lip. So he basically messed up
Oh,
John in the first fight. So the second fight,
mm,
they were going to do it in Vegas. Okay. They had to move the fight because they found picograms of illegal substances in John's urine sample. So they moved the fight from Las Vegas to Los Angeles because California State was like, all right, the Nevada doesn't want to take the fight. We'll take the fight. And so all the fans that went to Vegas, some of them were able to make it to LA, which, by the way, was extra gas money for them to go drive to. And then they had to book hotels. So it was a cause of massive inconvenience to the fans and also the fighters that were also in the undercard. But nonetheless, they got the card moved. So they moved
mm,
an entire card because one jurisdiction was not willing to play ball and the other one did. All in a
yeah.
span of a couple of days, by the way.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, with Conor Benn as well. Like, he's not allowed to fight in the UK because the British Board of Boxing Control, they're not allowing him to fight. But he was able to fight under another jurisdiction, and in America, they allowed him
Yeah.
to fight.
Well, that
because
tells you a lot about us, right? Our
uh,
laws here. But I think that's also, because look, here's the thing with the UK, there's only one law, one law of the land, right? Whereas with America, we have multiple laws depending on where you're from. Like, for example, in California, obviously weed is legal here. It's been legal here for a while. But if you get caught with weed in another state, maybe they'll penalize you or lock you up for it.
yeah,
You see what I'm saying? So it's very different,
yeah,
uh, which is why we
different,
can
isn't
move fights around here easily.
it? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy,
man.
man.
Yep. Well, what else? What else do we have? We've been going for about an hour 40 minutes now. This is quite a good time frame that we got going on here, man.
I enjoyed
So
it, man.
what
Definitely enjoyed the talk, because obviously the difference is with UFC and boxing. I like to speak about it, and it's very interesting if you're not in the sport. So when I'm talking to you about UFC, I get more information about it in terms of knowledge and things that are going on. Do you get what I'm saying?
do
So
you
it's kind of
see
interesting.
do you see the similarities of the dynamics? For example, like you look at Dylan White, right? Here's a great example. He throws a table at Derek Chisora, right? And then
You
you
mean
have Conor.
Derek Chisora throwing a table at Dylan White?
No, no, no. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I'm sorry. Okay, it was the. Of course, it would be Derek Chisora. He's out there. He's a crazy dude, right? So of course it would be him to do that. So
Mhm.
that same similar dynamic, you also see that with Conor McGregor throwing a dolly at a bus, right? So again, it's almost like we almost have the same type of characters on both sports, and also very similar uh occurrences, right? Obviously, Connor Ben's steroid situation, John Jones's steroid situation, having to move jurisdictions.
Yeah,
There's a lot of similarities. It's almost
yeah,
like
lot of
the
similarity.
two parallel worlds colliding in a same similar fashion.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely, man. There's also like a few fighters who I do take interest in from uh from the
Oh,
UFC.
yes, we forgot
Khamzat Chimaev.
about the Kamzat. I know you wanted to talk about that. So with Kamzat Shamaev and yeah, Robert Whitaker. Obviously,
Yeah.
this is a great test
What do
for.
what do you know about Robert Whitaker? Is he that good? Is he gonna give Khamzat a challenge, or do you think Khamzat's gonna beat him?
So Robert Whitaker has experience in Olympic wrestling on the Commonwealth level, by the way, because he was part of the Australian Commonwealth Olympic team in wrestling. But he's
Okay.
also a former world champion. Obviously, this was the guy that Israel Adesanya had to beat to win the championship. So he's a former champion in the
Mhm.
UFC, great wrestler, good striking. He'll
Yeah.
give uh, Kamzat a run for his money.
Right.
So I think that Kamzat really has to pull out his striking in this particular fight. He really has to pull out his boxing skills, his kickboxing skills, and Muay Thai in order to counter the uh, wrestling of Robert Whitaker. Because Robert Whitaker, I don't know if he's a better wrestler than Kamzat, but I would not be surprised if he does end up taking Kamzat at least one time in this fight. But I also see Kamzat sort of out wrestling him as well, ragdolling him around. But that also goes with when you have two wrestlers that are very prominent in their wrestling prowess. What usually ends up happening is you end up seeing a boxing match. So this is
Okay.
why I say Kamzat really has to get his striking going because both of these guys are going to cancel each other out
Mm.
in their wrestling department. In other words, they may take one or the other down, or they may just stuff each other's takedowns and just end up doing a stand-up grappling in which they're going to end up breaking off of the clinch and having the force to have their fight in a boxing range or a kickboxing range. Very similar to the first Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman fight. But speaking of Khamzat, I have a video out on him as well that involves P. Diddy. Because as you know, P. Diddy is... so the name of it is P. Diddy can't leave the U.S. Khamzat can't come into the U.S. So I talk about why P. Diddy can't leave the United States after the raid that had happened to him. You heard about that, right? I'm sure, everyone in England has heard about that, because I know hip hop is a big, culture out there in the UK. So I know people, have followed up with even Pierce Morgan. Pierce Morgan had DJ Vlad in, doing interviews about the subject matter. He even had P. Diddy's, a lawyer in it. So yeah, I know the UK is definitely tapped into that story. But yeah, P. Diddy can't leave and Khamzat can't come in. And the reason why Khamzat can't come in is because of his ties and affiliation with Ramzan Kadyrov. It has to only be that, right? Because there are a lot of Russian fighters that come in and out of here. And I'm wondering, like, what is, the reason for, but what's weird is Khabib, he's also visited Ramzan Kadyrov before, but he can come in and out of California with no problem. The only difference is Khamzat Chimaev shows up in Ramzan Kadyrov's videos like he is Suge Knight or P. Diddy. You know what I mean? Like he really shows up in his, like he shows that he's his friend. Like Khabib doesn't do all that. Like, okay, you want to invite me because I beat Conor McGregor? Great. Okay, you want to give me a Mercedes-Benz because of that? Great. But he doesn't like buddies up with Ramzan Kadyrov. Khamzat actually does. He trains Ramzan Kadyrov's son. He trains Ramzan Kadyrov himself. He goes and has dinner with him on a constant basis. So, it's that type of party. You know what I mean? And the U.S. Treasury is looking at this like, oh man, we can't have this guy here. But that's why if Trump wins, because Trump is friends with Dana White, right?
Okay.
So if Trump wins the election, then all Dana White has to do is say, hey, listen, I got this guy named Khamzat. He can't come to the U.S. Say no more. They just write it on a piece of paper. Khamzat, you can come to the U.S. They send it to the U.S. state treasury because obviously it involves the economy of the United States if you're going to hold fights here, right? Because let's just be honest, Khamzat is a big star, bro. He brings in big numbers. Regardless of your political or religious affiliation, people want to see Khamzat fight. So he's good for business in America. So, but Joe Biden doesn't seem to think so. Or I don't know. Joe Biden doesn't know what to think, honestly. So, you know what I mean? So that's that. But yeah, that fight with Robert Whittaker and Khamzat is going to be a very challenging one. And, shout outs to Turki Al-Sheikh, the excellent guy, as Tyann Booth likes to call him, because he doesn't have any strong vernacular on really describing that guy other than the excellent guy. So an excellent guy that does excellent things for the sport of MMA and boxing.
Yeah, of course, man. It's gonna be good though to see what. I think the Excellency guy's got a UFC card in Saudi, right?
That's it. That's the Khamzat Whittaker fight.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's gonna be good, man. Has there previously been any UFC events in Saudi?
No, not even MMA. I think this is their first MMA ever, because MMA in the Arab world is more prevalent in obviously the UAE. They've been it's very prevalent in the UAE. Bahrain, Mohammed Makayev, Mohammed Makayev, he trains out in Bahrain. Not only that, he has the prince and the head of the special forces of Bahrain training him. Right, so he gives him a training facility to train at in Bahrain. Qatar, they have MMA fights. Egypt has MMA fights. Jordan has MMA fights. Even Conor McGregor has fought out in Jordan before in the Cage Warriors, promotion. But Saudi Arabia, never, not yet. And Hamzah is actually going to be the first headline MMA event, never mind a UFC, MMA in total.
Yeah.
So the
I think
Saudis
that they're going to get much more money now due to the fact that there's excellency involved, you know?
Yep.
So I feel like
Yep.
it's good for both of the sports, UFC and boxing.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think there's yeah. The thing is though with the UFC, see what's interesting about this is okay, this is a great segment to get this topic out there, right?
Yeah.
The overall conversation in MMA, because there's been a lawsuit going on that the UFC settled, right? Because of fighter pay. So the argument is that, okay, maybe there are other organizations out there that, let's say, the Saudis can fund. And if they do that, man, I'm telling you, they can easily turn the UFC into number 2, right? So what did the UFC do? They're like, if we can't beat them, we're going to join them. So we're going to give them UFC fights and partner up with them so they don't go with the PFL and load them up into, a giant and beat our organization. So that's a smart strategy on the UFC. You got to join with the Saudis. Just like with anything else, bro, I'm telling you, the Saudis are like that, right? You got to take this into consideration. The Saudis went and took out a journalist who, by the way, yes, he was Saudi, but he was also an American citizen. And you know what America did? Absolutely nothing. They looked the other way. They're like, what? Assassination? What? No, we don't see nothing. Because a lot of the American dollar is tied into the oil reserves in Saudi Arabia. But, that's a very dangerous subject to get into. Ain't no thing, because we're just, we're sports, combat sports guys and, a little, a little too dangerous for us to talk about. You know what I mean? So, but to the excellent guy, you are an excellent man. You're awesome. Don't hurt us, please. Oh, what happened? Is that it? Where's Zane at? Oh, okay. Did his connection go out or? I believe okay, there we go. Okay. Did the connection go out? Hold on a second. Let me finish this off with Zane here for a second. Oh, there you are. Okay, there you are, Zane. All right, there you are. All right, sorry.
Don't know what happened there, man. Connection, man.
Well, I know what happened. I think it was never mind. We're like I said, we're combat sports guys, and I'm not going to go there again. So,
like you said, big up Turkey El-Sheikh for
yes, excellent guy, very excellent guy.
The fights they want and the right money the fighters deserve. To be honest. Because I know when Ngannou came to boxing, he got paid a lot more than what he does at the UFC, which is substantially quite a lot more,
Right.
And that's because of Turkey El-Sheikh,
You know what? Okay, that's perfect. I wanted to at least hit the 2-hour mark with this, right? So, we probably have 6 minutes to do that. So I wanted to say this in regards to that, right? Because obviously the biggest argument that a lot of fans say is, well, why doesn't the UFC just pay them more, right? Okay, so I'm going to break down some fun. Okay, there we go. I think my mic had went out there for a second.
That's
Are we good?
just repeat stuff. Yeah, what did you say?
Okay, so what I was saying was, let me break down some financial aspects to this, right? Because obviously, the biggest argument that a lot of pro, fighter pay people always like to say is, well, why don't they just pay the fighters more? Okay, so
Mm.
here's why they don't. And the main reason is this. So if the UFC was to pay the fighters more, believe it or not, the UFC would go broke. Not only would they go broke, the reason why they're able to pull out these types of productions that they do, the reason why they're able to pull up this many fights as they're able to do is because they pay the fighters what they pay them and they keep everything else while using that money to build the next event and the next event after that. So, the idea that, okay, well, why don't you just pay them millions of dollars to get in there? It's a little bit harder to do that when they have to sustain a business. Now, in the past, the reason why a lot of MMA companies don't do well is because this is what they do. They overpay the fighters. The PFL right now is sort of dealing with that with Francis Ngannou. They're
Oh,
dealing with that because they're overpaying him, and he's not even fighting in MMA. He's making more of his money in boxing. That has
yeah.
nothing to do with them. Sure, did they get a percentage? I don't know. The way that it looks like in his contract, maybe not. So they're not
Mm.
getting anything out of Francis Ngannou. They're paying him to be a spokesman for their MMA company, but they're also paying him to make money in boxing that they're not getting. Because
Oh,
if you're in the UFC and you're boxing, guess what? That 100 million that McGregor got, 70 of that went to the UFC. And what did they do with that Floyd Mayweather money? They used that to build the next fight and the next fight and the next fight and fights that may have nothing to do with Conor McGregor or anyone in his team. That's
mm.
the reason
Wow.
why
Yeah, no,
the UFC does what they do, and it's also the reason why they are the biggest and best company in MMA because of the lack of pay that they do. So the cognitive dissonance that you got to have as a fan when you're dealing with that, right? Do you want all the best fights all the time? And I think if you're a fan, you're going to say yes. But if you only care about the individual factor, then you'd want them to pay them the maximum amount. But if you pay them the maximum amount, that's going to come with a cost. That's going to come with you not getting the John Jones fight, the Israel Adesanya fight, the Dricus Duplessis fight, the Ilya Tapora fight, the Paddy Pimblett fight, all these different events where they can go to New Zealand, where they can go to Manchester, where they can go to France, where they can go to the UAE. All of that goes away. So that is the reason why they operate in the way that they do. But as a fan, that's the two things that you have to contend with in your mind. Do you want the fights or do you want the fighters to get paid? And that's a hard decision if you're a true mixed martial arts fan.
Mm. No, I get where you're coming from. Yeah, I always wondered why they pay less than the boxing, because I know they get substantially a lot more the boxers do.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, great subject, man. That was a great topic too. You hit the nail on the head on that, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one of the things that I offer in Kyrie Abu El-Kheer MMA YouTube channel is nothing but objective facts. Obviously, I'm also going to give you some of my biased takes, but when I do, I'm going to tell you where I'm biased and where I'm being objective and truthful at. Just like Zayn
Respect.
Musa, Heavy Dosage Boxing. Don't forget to like and subscribe to both of our channels where we
Make
cover.
sure you check out Kyrie's MMA channel. It's one of the best ones out there, and it's gonna be there in the future, man. It's gonna get up there. We're just gonna help support each other, as brothers get up there,
Inshallah,
So,
man. Well, hey, I gotta tell you what, this is not only been a show, but this has been more like a pre-Eid hangout. You know what I mean? Like
100%, bro,
it's like
man. It
we're
was a
hanging out.
great conversation, man.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
interesting. Obviously, I learned a lot from it, man, because I don't know a lot of things about the UFC as well. So, when you tell me all these things, it's a great insight. and it's very good because you got a lot of knowledge about it, and you know what you're talking about, you know. So yeah, keep it up, man, and make sure
Thank
you guys follow up Kyrie, man. Hit him up on his socials as well, and give him some interviews as well from the MMA side of things, you know, fighters and that. I'd like to see that as well. So yeah,
Inshallah,
big
man.
yourself up, Harry, man.
So has this been the longest pod you've ever done?
Yeah, for sure, 100%, man.
Have
Like I was
you've
meant to
never
break
done
my
anything
fast.
over 2 hours before?
No, to be honest, like I'm very, very funny with giving people my time because I know that time I won't get back again. But when we
Yeah,
talk about something we love, it's like I don't see it as I'm wasting time. You know what I mean? Because it's something I love and something I'm passionate about, like yourself as well. Do you get me? So
that's right,
like I
man.
was meant to break my fast, but I broke my fast whilst I was speaking to you. So that
That,
tells you how much I was interested in this podcast, man. So
well,
yeah,
thank you,
man,
man.
it's
And
great, great to have
on
you
that note, on
and
that note,
always.
also you helped me while fasting because it's still daylight over here. It's still close to well, actually, yeah, it's about to be time for a door prayer right now. So I
Hopefully.
definitely got to get to that. But
Yeah,
yeah, you helped me throughout that time because obviously I've been up since Fajr, so it's a
oh
good way
wow,
to sort of kill time. And not only that, Eid is only a couple of days away. You know how it
yeah,
is, one of the happiest times for Muslims around the world. And with
hundred
that,
percent.
I want to say to you and to everyone, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah barakatuh. And
Oh
uh,
yeah, Alex.
Ramadan Mubarak and an early Eid Mubarak to everyone around the world, whenever you're watching this and wherever you're watching this. May Allah,
Likewise, man. And
may
free
Allah bless all
Palestine,
of you.
free
Absolutely.
Palestine.
Free Palestine. Yes. We can't forget about them and the struggles that they go through. We have a lot of struggles in our own life, but my goodness, man, not the way that they got it over there. So we must be very thankful, but also be very mindful of what they are going through in this current moment of time. Ameen, ameen, inshallah. Assalamu
Thank
alaikum,
you,
brother.
bro. Alaikum
And you
salam.
have a good one.
Take care, my bro.
You as well, brother. Assalamu alaikum.